Hello everyone, let's go to the 110th example. Declare a structure to represent complex numbers made up of the real part and the imaginary part. Next, read the two complex numbers, the real part followed by the imaginary part of each one. Present as an answer the addition, subtraction, and the product of complex numbers, being one value per line. So let's go to the program and see what is happening here. First of all, I am include the library stdio.age, which allow us to print messages on the screen. Here, I am including the typedef structure complex numbers, and so every time I call the name complex numbers will be a reference for this structure complex numbers. And this structure has two float variables, one for the real part and one for the imaginary part. These complex numbers has an array of two places, the int j, the float, 6 float variables for the sum of the real part, the sum of the imaginary part, the difference of the real and the imaginary part, and the multiplication, the product of the real and the imaginary part. This for loop will start with the 0, with the value of j equal to 0, the value of j has to be slower than 2, and every time this loop runs, the value of j will be increased by 1. This scanf will storage everything for your keyboard, but in this case, the everything for your keyboard has to be a real value and a number with points. For example, 3.4 is a real value, and this space is just to certify that you are including in the value just the value that you are currently typing, not a past value. And the same for the real part and for the imaginary part. So the sum of the real, the sum of the imaginary will be equal to 0, and the difference in the product will be equal to 0 too. And here I am calculating and printing the sum. So the sum of the real part will be equal to the value of the real plus the next value of the real, and the sum of the imaginary part will be equal to the same. And here I am printing the sum of the real part and the sum of the imaginary part. I am calculating and printing the difference. So the difference of the real minus the next one, and the difference of the imaginary part minus the next one, and pretty much for the same, the sum and the difference is pretty much the same. Here is the difference. The product of the real part will be equal to the first value times the second value minus the first imagined part times the second imagined part. And in this case, the product of the imaginary part is the first real part times the second imaginary part plus the second real part times the first imaginary part. And this printf is just print the multiplication, or the product will be equal to the percentage f in the parentheses I/n to skip a line, and the variables. So let's go to the terminal and see what is happening here. 2.7, 2.5, and 1, 2, 5.5, and 1. So the sum will be equal to 8 plus 3 imaginary, and the difference will be equal to minus 3 plus 1 imaginary, and 11.75 plus 3.5 the imaginary part. So as you can see, this is the calculations of the value, and this is pretty much the same, pretty much for this episode, and the link for the script is on the video description, and subscribe for regular content.